Ah, the perks of RV life. It's late at night. You're tired. You spot a desert campground. Pull in and set up shop. Buttons are pushed to pop out your pop-outs. A once crammed disaster zone becomes livable for a while. And best of all, you've blindly stumbled onto somewhere like Red Rock Canyon. And well, it has much to offer and many ways to soothe your soul. Welcome to our 3 Goodyear-starred restaurant. Making a couple ribeyes, some mac and cheese. It's like our first real food we've had in a few days. It's not a sandwich. David Nicholson, ladies and gentlemen. Hello World Director. We've got vegetables, Bob. This is good. Re-energized by Kraft's top powderologists and some instant coffee, we make our move toward the city of Mojave, one of my favorite places in the world. It's the home to the great windmill forests, to neighborhoods full of hardworking and possibly hard-living people, and most notably, to aerospace adventurers of all stripes. For decades, the Mojave Air and Spaceport has been the place where you test out weird new crafts, be they supersonic jets or space planes. The folks I want to see are as Mojave as it gets, and they have set their sights on the moon. We're off to see Mastin Space, which I guess you could consider a startup in the new space industry, except they've been here at the Mojave Airport for about 15 or 16 years. It's a fascinating company. Mastin Space was founded in 2004 by this guy, Dave Mastin. It is said that he is shy or elusive or both. So here I am with this guy, Sean Mahoney, the longtime CEO of Mastin. This is where Mastin started?
Yeah. This was the original building. We've reconfigured things, but it was a garage rocket company, literally in the garage. Very hands-on, gritty, get it done, rather than the, white lab coat kind of thing.
Over the years, Mastin has built up a reputation as a great place for young, hungry engineers to get their hands dirty with aerospace technology. We're talking small teams of 5 or 6 people building things like this. That's Zombie. It's not the prettiest spacecraft, but it proved that you could take off vertically, cut the engine, relight it, and land. This all happened back in 2010, well before SpaceX was landing rockets, and it caught the attention of one Elon Musk.
That is a phenomenal email, and it's glad to have helped inspire it. Now, today, Mastin has got over 600 flight operations under our belt with these type vehicles. No one else has done 600 rocket landing operations, period.
What Sean will not say is this. For years, Mastin has lived hand to mouth, going from one small contract to another. It hasn't been the best run or, frankly, most viable business. In fact, Mastin kind of became known for getting passed by the likes of SpaceX, Rocket Lab, and others. Which is why it was quite the surprise when NASA decided to give this tiny outfit $80 million this year to build a lunar lander.
Mastin has a series of instruments that NASA has selected that we are going to deliver to the South Pole of the Moon in December of 2022.
That's soon.
That is soon. And so after a decade of building blocks and iterations, it's now go time. We're purchasing the ride to point us at the moon.
So inside of a SpaceX fairing.
Yeah, and then our craft will do the corrections, bring us in, put us on the surface.
And I think it's going to fly 9 scientific apparatus, is that right?
We've got instruments that are going to be trying to scan the surface of the moon from on the lander itself, but being able to execute that landing is going to be the tricky part. And we've got a couple different landing sites that we're still kind of looking at.
Despite the massive contract, Mastin's digs are as humble as ever. And its grit, still very gritty.
Are these guys getting ready for something?
This is a small rocket engine test rig.
Okay.
This is where we learn and practice and get that real world experience that's not the stuff that's in the textbook. One of the beautiful things about operating in Mojave, we have a test site on the other end of the airport. You hook it up, you drive it out, you do the test. There's no getting on a plane, there's no shipping, it's right here.
Part of the story of Mastin and being out here and being this hands-on place is that like things weren't always great, right? Because you're dependent on a contract here and there. And so what's it been like keeping the business running all this time?
It's been a challenge. We will look at a project, we'll do an estimate, and we'll say, great, we'll do it for this amount. So when things go over, it's on us. The markets, while there is commercial customers, the reality is there's still government dollars that are really the major driver. Now, with NASA kind of as the anchor customer for some of these missions, there's a market that's established. And in a broader sense, these next 5 years are going to set the standards for humanity's expansion beyond the planet.
We will return American astronauts to the moon for the first time since 1972 for long-term exploration and use.
The current administration is super into the moon, and I mean, for you guys, this has all been pretty fortuitous.
Yeah. Look, the moon is a topic of international discussion and debate. Eventually, human beings will draw the moon into our economic sphere of influence. That is where humanity will be. And so the ones who get there to establish the services, whether it's communication, whether it's transportation, interfaces, or any of these things, the people who are doing it will get the chance to set those things now.
Well, I see Elon's now that there's money out there, he's suddenly interested in the moon as well. So.
Yeah, and it is really cool to see the thing that you've been working on become popular, but really, Elon is very focused on Mars. Let's go to the moon first.
You didn't say anything about the shirt, man.
I noticed immediately, and I greatly appreciate it.
Is the lander like sitting in one of these warehouses, or like what stage are we at?
So we do have some hardware that's already coming in. Probably middle of next year is when you will have an actual thing together, and this will be getting information from the moon where Artemis is planning to land humans.
Mastin's survival seems assured for now. That's not always the case here in Mojave. Other space startups like XCOR have gone by the wayside. And companies like Virgin have spent more than $500 million trying to reach orbit with little success. The biggest risk takers, though, are humans, like Elliot here, because he's a test pilot who volunteers to put his life on the line. The last time I saw Elliot was right after that crash, way back in 2016. He sat for an interview.
To be the pilot for that test, they're not skills you can just go get.
He even took me flying.
There's a couple of big bumps out there today. Woo! Yeah.
He never let on that it was his first time back in a plane after the wreck, or that he was still wounded and uneasy. Because I'm a jerk, I asked Elliot to take me to the scene of the crash, the famed Mojave Boneyard, where planes go to decompose.
Tell me about this crash. You were testing out a plane, and tell me what happened.
So this opportunity came out where a small jet engine company was looking for somebody to debut their engine. We flew the airplane successfully 2 times, and then the third flight, we had an engine failure, and I ended up weaving my way between the tails of the 747s here in the Boneyard until I could find a soft spot to put it down. At the end of the day, the engine that failed was a prototype engine, so I knew the risks that I was getting into.
You walked away, but you must have been shaken for a while after that.
Yeah, obviously, if you don't walk out of that and think about what you're doing with your life, you probably have problems. But I was flying again within a few days of the accident and testing airplane. I had another major incident in an airplane, an emergency landing within a week of that one. So get back up on the horse.
Have you considered shirtless beach volleyball?
Not till this moment.
Unlike many test pilots with military training, Elliot is actually an engineer who's had to work his way up into the test pilot game.
So there's basically 2 paths to flight tests. One is you go be a fighter pilot, and then you go from fighter pilot to test pilot. The other is you go spend 10, 15 years with a small company, and you work your way from an engineer to make that jump to the left seat.
I just love this about your story, man. So you've got the guys you see in Top Gun, and that's kind of who you're competing against. Somebody's got a new plane, and then you got to go up against the Top Gun guy and explain to these people why you should fly the plane.
Yeah, fundamentally. Remember, we lost a program to an astronaut. I never even made a counterpoint, right? But now that I've been in this business for a while, the science as an engineer is fascinating, right? You go and learn something in school, you can read it in a book, you can see how the equation works, but until you can feel it in your hand and see how that all adds up to whether it is or is not what you want from an airplane, that's a whole nother level. And as a test pilot, I've flown 80 different kinds of airplanes successfely. I've got 11 first flights.
So that means you're the first person to take the machine up.
Yeah.
Mojave's had this mythic status, of this is where you come to do the most groundbreaking work and to push machines to their edge. Is that still the case?
I think there's no question that Mojave is absolutely on the radar right now. The whole world's watching to see what comes out of Mojave. This is very desolate land where you can play and do things you can't do other places on the planet. And it attracts big ego dudes, frontal lobe kind of guys. And to be able to get a bunch of smart dudes pointing in the same direction, go make something fly that doesn't look like it should, that's a hard thing. And it's very rewarding when it works, and when it doesn't, you can spend an eternity thinking about how it all added up against you.
And so here we are in 2020. A pandemic, fires in the West, the overall madness of a year which feels more and more like a work of experimental Dadaist art. And yet somehow I end up in the back of a pickup truck, driving through a plane graveyard during a Mojave sunset. It's not perfect, because perfect can't exist right now. But I gotta tell ya, it ain't bad.
So the last segment of your trip down 395 takes us to Mojave, which it sounds like you've been to before as an aerospace reporter and enthusiast, this seems like a place that you would probably want to go to often. What made you decide to go back? Were you just like, it's along the route, this makes sense for the show, something new was happening? Like, what brought you there?
Yeah, well, part of it gives you that extreme of being in the desert and kind of like at the ground floor after we'd been up in the mountains in some of the other episodes, and then you were very polite. The other part is just that I'm a total aerospace nerd, helplessly.
I mean, in particular, I loved the Mastin story because you talk about how hard it is to make it actually be a business. Like it feels like there's this tension between like building the cool thing that shoots off into the air and trying to make sense of something, or like, can you just talk more about that? I wanted to know, like, why do you think they have had such a hard scrabble 15 years, and why has it been hard for them to have the same, excuse the pun, liftoff as other space companies?
Yeah, Mastin's fascinating because they're in like this weird time and place where like the founder, he'd gotten rich in Silicon Valley, but not like Elon or Jeff Bezos rich. And they came along like 15 years ago. So it was like, that was back when most of the new space stuff was kind of failing and SpaceX was like they were in this weird time, and they've always been, so every rocket company I run to, like SpaceX or Blue Origin, all the big ones, half the people you meet there, not half, but a bunch of the people you meet there, you're just like, oh, where'd you work before? It's like, oh, I was a college dropout and I went to Mastin and I worked there for 2 years. It's like this training ground, and so many of the cool people I've met in the aerospace industry came from Mastin. And I was like, I gotta go see this place. I've been trying to get there for a while. They sort of like were kind of like anti-attention, and until I think this moon contract, they're a little more willing to talk now. But yeah, so I've always wanted to see the place just because it has this totally unique position in the aerospace world as like, I don't want to say minor leagues, but as like the training ground for like the big aerospace companies.
Was the moon first shirt like, is that like an anti-Occupy Mars or like it seemed like that was the reference, but I wasn't sure.
It is. I am neither pro Mars or like anti or moon, but I knew that would play well at Mastin. And it is funny because like Mars, because like Elon and Jeff were putting a lot of attention on it for a while. The moon had like, people were passing it by, and it wasn't getting as much love and attention. And then lately, partly because of the political administration in the U.S. and China getting into the moon and everything, it's kind of come back. And so, yeah, there is, I don't really affiliate myself. I think it's all kind of cool, but there is like this whole moon first camp, which are like, screw Mars, let's go do this thing and like prove we could do it. And it makes more sense to go there.
Yeah. You touched on this a little earlier, but it was a question I had, which is, like, what is it like to live in Mojave? Like, is there a town? Like, what kind of places? Because presumably there's like kind of a community of people who both live and work there, and it's kind of in the middle of nowhere.
I always kind of, maybe because I don't have to live there and I'm just passing through. I like how gritty the town is and how it just like sort of fits the like no BS thing with the technology. I mean the people. I dig the vibe. The companies are all like based in these hangars that are just attached to the airport, and the airport has to be the weirdest airport in the world because there are like planes taking off all the time, and yet you can just totally go to the end of the runway and like blow up a rocket engine, and you just like ask for like 20 minutes to go try to light this thing, and everybody is like, okay, we'll pause for like 20 minutes. I mean, like all through history, there's been these stories of like these huge smoke clouds covering the whole airport, and then you've got like the airport, airplane graveyard that's back there.
Speaking of the airplane graveyard, let's talk about the crash video, which like I'm glad you showed it twice because I would have both not ever wanted to see it and also wanted to see it like 10 times. I went back and rewind. I mean, it's terrifying, but it seemed, and especially that shot at the end where he's lying there and you can see he's like breathing really fast and his glasses are askew, and I don't know, I was just blown away by it. Like what a job.
Elliot's like, we met him 4 or 5 years ago, and I was just fascinated by this guy from the start. And then when you watch that footage, you're like, man, how can you ever do this again after that's happened? He told me, like, in that exact footage you're talking about, where he said it was great because it showed that he never lost consciousness. And this is like a big thing in the test pilot world, is that if you could crash and not go unconscious, that's like, that sort of keeps you in a job. And I don't know if it's like a badge of honor, but it's like, oh, okay, this guy, he's got what it takes and his body is cut out for this. And so he was like, oh, we were really thankful we had that footage. But the first time I saw that, and I knew he'd survive because I was still talking to him, but like, you're like, there's no way this guy walks out of this plane.
Well, and it's not like the planes are designed for like ultra safety. I mean, it's like they tend to be tiny, or like they're focused on something else.
They're not like race cars where there's like, you see those guys have horrendous wrecks, but then like they're in this cocoon of protection. I mean, it's like not like that at all. And then, he says, he's like, I had found somewhere soft to take it in. I mean, it's like, it's a trailer full. He said it was like full of like all this old NASA phone books, I think, or something like that. So that was like the softest place. And then he was talking a little bit about, I think like on Reddit and some other spots, there's all these other, either armchair pilots or test pilots giving him grief for like, why didn't you do it this way? Why didn't you do it that way? And, he was just saying that, when he looked around, I mean, everywhere else, it was like you were going to go into a plane or some stack of steel and machinery. And so that was like the best option. But I just love that he called it like a soft spot.
Yeah, that's just nuts. Not only like an incredible story of a person in an incredible moment, but also of a job that I just didn't even consider existed, but obviously has to.
Thanks for a chat with us. It was really fun and kind of different to do, and I definitely came to appreciate RVs and getting out, and it's like I would 100% do it again.